All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go on to the next one, the American Revolution, Part 2B. Yeah, to be or not to be. I'm so funny. Okay, so anyhow, this hopefully is going to be pretty short. Sarah, take good notes. Pay attention. Write down what I say. Write down what is on the board. Okay, so I left you with this particular one at the very beginning of 1777. January 1777, the American Army just won those two victories, one at Trenton, one at Princeton, and both armies have gone into winter quarters, the British Army in New York City and the American Army in Morristown, New Jersey, and this is the end of the 1776 campaign, and now we are on to the planning for the British plan of 1777. This is how the British Army plans to end the revolution, to beat the Americans, and it looks something like this. That looks like a map. This is a map. This is Canada, the St. Lawrence River all the way up here. This is New York City down here, the coast of Connecticut and Rhode Island, and all that good stuff. There's Massachusetts, the strong arm of Massachusetts right there going up to Maine, all that good stuff. This is actually a French map of the theater of the war. I'm going to use my pen here. I'm going to turn my back on you for a second, make a thick line, make a dotted line. The campaign consists of a three-part strategy. First thing that's going to happen is a main attack. It's going to come down from New York, and it's going to come down this way to about here. That's the plan. A second group is going to come this way, and they're going to come and loop across, and they're going to come across New York this way. And a third group is going to be coming up from that group in New York City, and they're going to come up the Hudson River, and they're going to go this way. And we're all going to meet right here in Albany, New York. And in doing so, we are going to take out the entire part of New York. We are going to cut the head off the snake. You remember that Join or Die cartoon? We're going to cut New England completely off. We're going to cut the snake off, and the rest of the colonies and the revolution will die because they'll be all separated. That's the British plan. Let's take a look at the reality. The reality starts with this little smaller attack that came around this way, under the command of a general by the name of British general by the name of St. Ledger. You don't need to remember that. And you see these two stars because there are two battles there. What happens is that the British Army shows up outside a place called Fort Stanwix, and it's an American fort. It's a brand new fort. It's on the way. It's blocking their path. There's some British soldiers and a fair number of Indians that are helping the British soldiers, and they surround Fort Stanwix, and they would call it lay siege to it. They're blocking supplies in and out, that kind of thing. So the Americans send a relief column, a group of troops there to help them. While they're on the way out, the British ambush them. So we've got the Battle of Fort Stanwix and Oriskany in August of 1777. And what happens in the Battle of Oriskany, that's the American Relief Party. The American Relief Party gets ambushed and they're falling back. And the American general, a guy by the name of Herkimer, he's severely wounded in his leg, and he literally leans up against a tree and starts to direct the American forces, and he regroups the Americans, and the Americans beat the British soldiers at Oriskany. At the same time this battle's going on, they've left their camp outside of Fort Stanwix, so the guy from Fort Stanwix say, let's go get the British stuff. And they go running out there, and they grab all the British stuff, and they trash all the Indian stuff. The Indians find out, and they leave. They're all ticked off, and so they leave the British, and the British are basically toast, and that whole big attack coming in from the west side of New York has now failed, and the British can't take Fort Stanwix, and they retreat back. By the way, Herkimer dies from that wound. Botched operation. Hate it when that happens. So this one dies. Now, how about this main attack coming down this way? This is going to be the main attack. You can see it comes down this way, and I have two more stars down here. Okay? What happens there? The British are moving slowly south along the Lake Champlain corridor. It's a river going that way, and then it comes down. You have Lake Champlain, and you got a couple of other small lakes, and then you're going to pick up the Hudson River again and come the rest of the way. The British are led by a guy by the name of John Burgoyne. His nickname is Gentleman Johnny, and he is a British general, and he really likes the good life. He has brought with him some 20-30 wagons full of his personal property, including fine silverware and tables, and his mistress, who happens to be the married wife of one of his junior officers. Never a good thing. And he's coming down here. Now the Americans, to slow the British down, they are using what is called scorched earth tactics. And what that means is that they are destroying everything as they retreat. They're destroying all the supplies, anything else that could help the enemy. They're destroying it, so when the British move into the area, there's nothing left for them to be able to use. And so the British progress is very slow. By the way, they're also chopping trees down across the main roads, and the wagons can't get through, and the British cannons can't get through. And so the British are very much slowed down, and they're running short of supplies. So the British start sending out what are called foraging raids. They're going out to get supplies out in the countryside, and this is then going to lead us to the Battle of Bennington in Bennington, Vermont, in August 1777, a huge American victory where the Americans beat the Hessians, and also this little nifty thing called the death of Jane McCrae. Jane McCrae is supposed to be a very attractive young woman, and she actually is the fiancée of a loyalist, someone who wants to stay loyal to the king. But some of the Indians who are accompanying the raid and Gentleman Johnny Burgoyne, something happens, they go crazy, and they scalp her, they kill her. And the Americans, even though she's a loyalist, they kind of say, let's not worry about that part, and they bring up the whole thing about Indians scalping the beautiful American girl. And the countryside just goes absolutely, totally berserk. All these people start to join the American army, and so Burgoyne, he finds himself stuck, and he gets as far as about Saratoga, New York, and we're going to have what's called the Battle of Saratoga. And I got my little arrow there. We call it a battle, but it's actually a month-long engagement. It's a month-long battle, if you will, in quotes. But the basic thing is that the British can't go back. He's run out of supplies. We talk about the scorched earth. He doesn't have the supplies to get back up to Canada, where he came from. It's getting into September and October. He's not going to be able to get supplies. Winter comes pretty early up there. He can't go back. He'll never make it. And the Americans are blocking the way forward. And so Gentleman Johnny is really kind of stuck here. Two major battles. One's called the Battle of Bemis Heights, which takes place in September. And then in early October, we have this battle here called the Battle of Breyman's Redoubt. And if you search on this, Breymann, Breyman's Redoubt. And this is another one of those Don Troiani modern paintings where the Americans come sweeping over, beating up on the Hessians again, which we're actually very, very happy to do. And this ends up with the British surrendering to the Americans on October 17th, 1777. Burgoyne can't fight anymore. He can't move forward. He can't move back. He's stuck. He can't do anything. He needs to end this thing before he loses more troops. It's the first time a major British army, a full-scale British army, has surrendered to the Americans during the war. And it's huge. It's also important because this victory here helps us get French support for the revolution. The French are going to become our allies because for the first time other countries are thinking, you want to know what? These Americans really might pull this thing off. So that ends the second sweep that's coming down from the north. Now how about that third group that was supposed to come up from the south? We got this one ended with Oriskany and Stanwix. This one is ended with Bennington and Saratoga. What about this one? This guy, if you remember, is supposed to come up this way to add additional support. But instead, he decides he's going to go all the way down here, come up this way through the Chesapeake Bay, land here, move up to Philadelphia, capture Philadelphia and the Continental Congress, get all that done before the summertime's over, and march back up here and still be there in time to aid his buddies in New York. Ha! Doesn't happen. He comes up, and we end up with what are called the Battles of Brandywine in September 1777, where the British attack and the Americans lose, and the Battle of Germantown, where the Americans attack and we lose. So we lose twice. They are both American losses, but these are taking place outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Both American losses. The Brits know New York now is lost. It's late. It's getting into the middle of October. They know that the Burgoyne is in serious trouble, and they're not going to be able to get there in time. So what they do is they decide to spend the winter in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And the Americans, again, want to keep their eye on the British. They want to be close enough to the British to keep an eye on them, but far enough away so that if the British start to move out, they can retreat or move or something like that. So the Americans spend the winter in a lovely, jolly place called Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. And this is where they spend the winter of 1777 to 78. If you search online, you can take a look at this picture, especially zoom in over on this area right here. The American army is a little more than a rabble. They are short of supplies, short of clothing. Some of the guys are barefoot. Valley Forge has nothing there that's going to support a large number of troops, and the conditions are just absolutely incredibly difficult. They literally have to build all of their huts by hand. George Washington actually puts together contests to try and get the soldiers to increase it, but lots of sickness and people down here just literally falling over dead. Bad things. If you want to read about it, it's called The Diary of Albigence Waldo. It's very, very easy to find online. A fascinating primary source look at what conditions were like at Valley Forge. Really, really fun and interesting reading. But something really, really important happens at Valley Forge. George Washington does manage to keep the American army, hold them together, and they end up with this guy by the name of Baron von Steuben. Okay? The American army is trained by it. Now, he's an interesting guy. He's shown up to the Continental Congress. He's told them he's a German general and that he can aid Washington. He's not a general. Yes, he's German. He's a Prussian. It means he's from Prussia. Germany is not a country back then. It's a bunch of city-states. He's from the city-state or the region called Prussia. And he's basically about a captain in Frederick the Great's army. But he comes and he does know how to train soldiers. He knows how soldiers are supposed to fight the European way, the way the British Army is training. One of the other problems is he only speaks German. He doesn't speak any English. So what would happen at night, George Washington says, I want a couple of soldiers from every unit in the army to come together and we're going to train you guys. Once you guys get trained, we're going to send you back out to your units and it's going to be your job then to train the soldiers in your subordinate units once you go back out. So these guys would come together and von Steuben, who speaks German, would give his orders for tomorrow. He is an officer on the staff who speaks German and French, and that officer would take the German and translate it to French. There's an American officer who can take the French and translate it into English. So they have this giant game of whispering down the alley, giving out the orders for the following day. And apparently the only thing von Steuben knows how to do is curse. He can really curse in English, which apparently the American troops just love. They love to get this guy fired up and make him curse. Bottom line is when the British leave Philadelphia to return to New York by land the next spring in May and June of 1778, Washington and the American army, they chase after them because they want to have another battle with the British. And they give chase, and we end up with the Battle of Monmouth, New Jersey, also called the Battle of Monmouth Courthouse, in June of 1778. It's a brutally hot day. There are as many casualties because of heat stroke as there are due to actual combat wounds. The Americans and the British are both wearing these big heavy wool uniforms. Again, the guys are literally falling dead on the battlefield just from heat exhaustion. The Americans attack, and then they retreat, because when the British soldiers turn around to fight the American attack, the general who's in charge said, okay, now this is the part where we run away, because the Americans have always run away whenever the British attack. But Washington's got this new trained army, and when Washington sees the American troops coming back to retreat, Washington goes absolutely nuts, ballistic, and Washington starts swearing all kinds of great primary sources about Washington in this battle, and he gets the troops turned around and personally leads the troops back into battle. The Americans regroup and they re-attack again, and the British retreat this time. The Americans have more losses in soldiers than the British do, but they claim a victory because they control the land at the end of the battle. And this proves, in quotation marks, that the new American army, this new army that von Steuben has trained, they know how to fight, and they can fight a stand-up battle with the British. Still going to be a long war. It's only 1778. The war's not going to be over for another 3 or 4 years. But this is a huge morale booster for Washington and his army right there. After that, oh, by the way, one more very important thing about the Battle of Monmouth Courthouse, we have another one of our Molly pictures, another one of those rare opportunities we have during the American Revolution to really celebrate specifically known women, specifically ID'd women. Her name is Mary Ludwig Hayes. Her husband also was in an artillery crew. He passes out, I don't know if he dies, but he goes down from heat exhaustion. He's no longer able to work his position on the cannon, so she grabs his materials and she starts to fire the cannon with the rest of the crew, and we have this very patriotic picture from the probably late 1800s, early 1900s, that kind of a thing. You can see that it's just got that patriotic feel. And she's a second one of these Molly pictures that we've got. And now we have the Brits returning to New York City. New York City? Okay, they're going back to New York City to plan their next moves. The Americans go back to Upper New Jersey to wait out, find out what the British are going to do next. And that is the end of the 1777 campaign. Hope was faster than the last one. Sarah, did you get all that? Did you get good notes? If not, hit stop, rewind, go back, take your time, copy it down, get it all in there. Sarah, that's you. Okay, see you later. I gotta go turn this thing off. Bye.